There are places on this earth that don't want you there. Islands where the ground is alive with venom. Mountains that hide entire cities carved into rock. Forests so deep that stepping inside means vanishing from the world you know. These aren't relics of some distant past. They're real, they're here, and they're watching. Some are frozen wastelands where even bacteria struggle to survive. Others pulse with heat so intense the air itself becomes toxic. There are tunnels beneath capital cities, lined with the bones of millions. Valleys where tribes live as they have for thousands of years, untouched by roads, electricity, or names. And fortresses, where decisions that shape nations are made behind walls no outsider will ever breach. These aren't places that were lost to time. They're places that were never meant to be found. The locks on these doors aren't always physical. Sometimes it's the cold that keeps you out. Sometimes it's the heat. Sometimes it's the snakes. So many snakes that the ground itself seems to writhe. And sometimes it's simply distance. Miles and miles of nothing between you and a place that exists on maps but feels like it belongs to another world entirely. There are no tours here. No guidebooks. No well-worn paths leading to convenient viewpoints. Just warnings. Just boundaries. Just the quiet understanding that some places exist beyond our reach. Not because we haven't tried, but because they've refused to let us in. So, wherever you are right now, settled in for the evening, the noise of the day finally fading, make yourself comfortable. We're about to journey through 10 of the most forbidden, most dangerous, and most mysterious places on Earth. Places sealed by governments and guarded by nature. Places where trespassing could mean arrest, injury, or simply never being found. What draws you most to places we're never allowed to see? Is it curiosity, fear, or something deeper? If you're as fascinated by the forbidden as we are, go ahead and subscribe now to join the journey. And as always, the visuals are here to guide you, but they're not required. So feel free to close your eyes if you like. Just listen and follow along. Let's begin. Devon Island. The Arctic holds many extremes, but none match the alienness of Devon Island, a landscape so barren and Martian that NASA sends astronauts there to prepare for missions to another world. Located deep within Canada's Nunavut territory, above the 75th parallel north, this frozen expanse stretches across 21,331 square miles, making it the largest uninhabited island on Earth. Not a single permanent resident calls this place home, and for good reason. Temperatures plummet to minus 50 degrees Celsius in winter, while summer barely lifts the mercury above freezing. Indigenous Thule and Dorset peoples passed through this region centuries ago, but even they found the land too hostile for settlement. European explorers first mapped the island in the early 1800s, when William Edward Parry recorded its position during his 1819 expedition and named it after Devon, England. For more than a century afterward, Devon Island remained largely forgotten, a blank spot on maps that offered nothing to draw explorers back. It wasn't until the mid-20th century that scientists began to recognize what made this frozen rock truly extraordinary. At the heart of Devon Island lies the Houghton Impact Crater, a massive scar carved into the Earth 23 million years ago when an asteroid slammed into the surface during the Miocene epoch. The crater spans 12 miles in diameter, and its exposed interior reveals light gray impact melt rock and shattered terrain that bears an uncanny resemblance to Martian geology. Vast canyons, including the 1,000-foot-deep Astronaut Canyon, cut through the landscape with U-shaped profiles carved by ancient glaciers. Valley networks, gullies, ground ice, debris flows, and ancient lake beds dot the terrain, each feature echoing something observed on Mars. This convergence of Mars-like characteristics caught NASA's attention in the late 1990s, leading to the establishment of the Houghton Mars Project in 1997. Operated by the Mars Institute and SETI Institute, the program transforms Devon Island into a testing ground for spacesuits, rovers, drilling equipment, and exploration strategies. Astronauts train here because the island's cold, dry climate, rocky terrain, and limited vegetation approximate Martian conditions more closely than almost anywhere else on Earth. The Arctic day and night cycle and restricted communication capabilities simulate the isolation and challenges of long-duration space missions. Yet for all its scientific value, Devon Island remains almost entirely inaccessible to ordinary people. There are no roads, no towns, no infrastructure, nothing but raw geology and ice. The only way to reach the island is by chartered aircraft landing on a rough airstrip near the research station, and such flights cost upward of $10,000 per trip from Resolute Bay, the nearest settlement. Even with the expense covered, access requires special permits from Canadian authorities, and visits are limited to the brief research season between June and August. Outside those summer months, brutal weather makes travel impossible, and the temporary research stations are evacuated entirely. Weather alone would be obstacle enough, but the island presents other dangers. Polar bears roam freely across Devon's frozen expanses, and no rescue infrastructure exists to respond quickly if something goes wrong. Help, if it comes at all, could be delayed by days depending on conditions. Most of the island has never been walked by humans. Vast valleys, hidden caves, and remote corners remain unexplored, preserving ancient fossils and permafrost specimens that have lain undisturbed for millions of years. Climate change slowly reveals features once buried under ice. But even scientists conducting research here cannot reach every corner of this immense wilderness. Devon Island stands as Earth's last terrestrial frontier, a place so inhospitable that it serves as practice for leaving the planet entirely. The island's silence is absolute, broken only by wind across stone, and its emptiness reminds us that not all of Earth has been tamed. Here in the polar desert where temperatures rival those of a Martian summer, the largest uninhabited island on the planet waits, unreachable, unforgiving, and utterly alone. Poveglia Island. From the Arctic's frozen isolation, the journey shifts to warmth and proximity, an island visible from one of the world's most visited cities, yet as forbidden as any remote wilderness. Poveglia Island floats in the Venetian lagoon, less than half a mile from Venice proper, a 17-acre patch of land that tourists can see clearly from the waterfront. But no visitor sets foot there. The Italian government has sealed Poveglia behind strict legal prohibitions, and Venetian police patrol its waters to ensure no one approaches. This is not isolation imposed by nature, but by history and law, a different kind of inaccessibility entirely. Poveglia's story begins in the distant past, during the Roman invasions of 421 AD, when refugees fled to the lagoon's islands seeking safety. A small farming and fishing community took root, and for centuries the island functioned as an ordinary settlement with a church, housing, and agriculture. Medieval records from the 9th century reference the island's quiet existence, and in the 1300s, during the wars between Venice and Genoa, an octagonal fort was built, its stone walls still standing today as a visible landmark. Then came the Black Death in 1348, and Poveglia's purpose transformed into something far darker. Venice, as a major Mediterranean port, faced relentless waves of plague arriving on ships from infected regions. The city established quarantine stations called lazarettos on outlying islands, and Poveglia became one of the most heavily used. The practice of quarantine, derived from the Italian quaranta giorni, meaning 40 days, required incoming ships to anchor offshore, while crews and passengers were inspected. Anyone showing symptoms was forcibly removed and taken to the island to either recover or die in isolation. The facilities expanded during the 1576 plague outbreak, and again during the catastrophic 1630 epidemic, which killed 46,000 Venetians in just 16 months. Plague pits were dug across Poveglia for mass burials, and bodies were burned with lime to prevent further spread of disease. Estimates suggest that over 100,000 plague victims were buried or cremated on the island over the centuries. Their remains mixed into the soil in such quantities that archaeological studies confirm human bones and ash distributed throughout the ground. The island's earth itself became a monument to death. Centuries later, in 1922, Poveglia found new purpose as a psychiatric hospital operated by the Italian government. The facility housed hundreds of patients at its peak, employing standard treatments of the era: electroshock therapy, hydrotherapy, and isolation. Conditions were typical of early 20th century mental health institutions: overcrowding, limited oversight, and practices that would later be deemed inhumane. The hospital's bell tower, converted from the island's old 12th century church tower, served as an observation point, and patients occupied multi-story brick wards that spread across the island. The facility operated until 1968, when changes in Italian mental health law prompted its sudden closure. Law 180, passed in 1978, ultimately reshaped the nation's approach to psychiatric care, but by then, Poveglia had already been abandoned. Staff and patients left quickly, and medical equipment was left rusting in place, patient records scattered across floors. No official records about the hospital's operations have been publicly released, and the buildings, three-story brick structures, the partially collapsed bell tower, and administrative offices, have stood empty ever since. Today, Poveglia is a landscape of decay. Trees grow through the roofs of hospital wards, windows are shattered, and doors hang loose on corroded hinges. Erosion from lagoon waters undermines the foundations, and structural engineers have declared the buildings unsafe. There is no electricity, no running water, no maintenance of any kind since the hospital closed more than 5 decades ago. Vegetation has overtaken most structures, and wildlife, herons and cormorants, nest among the ruins. Italian law strictly prohibits landing on Poveglia without authorization, and violations carry fines of up to $500. Tourist boats pass at a distance, allowing glimpses of the crumbling buildings and bell tower, but none can dock. No harbor facilities remain. In 2014, the Italian government attempted to lease the island for 99 years, setting a starting bid of $513,000, but the auction failed to attract viable development plans. Multiple proposals for luxury hotels, museums, public parks have been submitted and rejected, often due to UNESCO regulations, environmental concerns about asbestos in the buildings, and the sheer cost of restoration. The island remains property of Italy's Ministry of Finance, with occasional authorized visits by structural engineers and historians. Limited archaeological surveys have been conducted, and some artifacts have been removed to Venetian museums, but no timeline exists for public access or development. Debate continues about whether to preserve or demolish the ruins, but for now, Poveglia serves primarily as a habitat for nesting birds and a distant curiosity for tourists in Venice. Close enough to see, yet entirely beyond reach, Poveglia Island stands as a reminder that proximity means nothing when law and history draw boundaries that cannot be crossed. An island where 100,000 plague victims were buried, visible from one of the world's most visited cities, yet you'll never set foot there. If you can't even click subscribe while sitting safely at home, what does that say? If you won't join us, write your reason in the comments. Prove you're braver than silence. Hashima Island. The Pacific Ocean holds its own abandoned island, but this one tells a story not of plague or isolation, but of industrial ambition frozen in time. Hashima Island, called Gunkanjima, Battleship Island, for its warship-like silhouette, rises from the sea 15 kilometers off the coast of Nagasaki, Japan. At just 480 meters long and 160 meters wide, covering a total area of 6.3 hectares, this tiny island once held one of the highest population densities ever recorded on Earth. Now it stands silent, a concrete ghost town where the past remains visible but unreachable. Coal was discovered beneath Hashima in 1810, and industrial mining operations began in 1887 when Mitsubishi Corporation purchased the island. The company built Japan's first concrete apartment building here in 1916, constructing a vertical city to house the workers extracting coal from shafts extending deep under the ocean floor. Land reclamation projects between 1897 and 1931 expanded the island's footprint, and massive seawalls were erected to protect against the typhoons that regularly batter this stretch of coast. By 1959, Hashima's population peaked at 5,259 residents crammed onto the small island, a density of 83 to 500 people per square kilometer. For context, Tokyo's density hovers around 6,000 people per square kilometer, making Hashima more than 13 times as crowded as one of the world's most packed cities. 9-story apartment blocks rose above narrow streets, and the island supported a full infrastructure: elementary and high schools, a hospital with 40 beds, a community center, cinema, shops, restaurants, and even rooftop gardens for recreation. Residents swam in a pool, played in pachinko parlors, and visited shrines, all within the confines of this artificial island. But Hashima's history is darkened by the years of World War II, when the island became a site of forced labor. Between 1939 and 1945, an estimated 500 to 800 Korean conscript laborers and approximately 200 Chinese prisoners of war were brought to Hashima and compelled to work 12-hour shifts in dangerous mine conditions with minimal food. These workers lived in separate, inferior dormitories, and many died from mine accidents, disease, and the brutal conditions. The Korean government claims 122 documented Korean deaths occurred on the island, though the total number remains disputed. Japan acknowledged in 2015, during Hashima's UNESCO World Heritage listing, that individuals were forced to work in harsh conditions. But the island itself bears no memorial, and the issue remains contentious between Japan and its neighbors. As petroleum replaced coal in Japan's energy economy during the 1960s, Hashima's mine production declined steadily. Mitsubishi announced the mine's closure on January 15, 1974, and the final residents evacuated on April 20, 1974. In a matter of months, the population dropped from thousands to zero. Residents left quickly, abandoning furniture, belongings, and personal items in their apartments. With no one to maintain the buildings, deterioration began immediately. Typhoon damage, salt corrosion, and structural decay gnawed at the concrete. Electricity and water systems fell silent, and for 35 years, Hashima remained completely off-limits. In 2009, the Japanese government permitted limited tourism to a small designated area of the island. Tour boats now operate from Nagasaki, bringing approximately 300,000 visitors annually before the pandemic, but access remains highly restricted. Visitors can only step onto a concrete pier and viewing platform. Entering the buildings is strictly prohibited due to safety hazards. Tours are canceled frequently due to bad weather, and even on calm days, visitors spend just 30 to 40 minutes on the island at a cost of approximately 4,000 to 5,000 yen, about $30 to $40. Most of Hashima remains off-limits indefinitely. More than 30 concrete buildings stand in various states of collapse, with roofs caved in, walls crumbling, and entire sections exposed where exterior facades have fallen away. Personal items, shoes, bottles, furniture, are visible through windows, but stairwells have collapsed in many structures, and asbestos present in the buildings poses a health hazard. Seawalls show significant damage, with some sections collapsed entirely, and typhoons continue to batter the island each year, accelerating decay. Structural engineers monitor the buildings closely, warning that total collapse is a growing risk. In 2015, Hashima was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site as part of the Sites of Japan's Meiji Industrial Revolution, though the designation sparked diplomatic tensions due to the forced labor history. The Japanese government allocated funds for preservation, but efforts are limited to exterior stabilization. Interior access remains prohibited, with no timeline for change. Vegetation is minimal due to salt spray and the overwhelming presence of concrete, and the island's industrial ruins stand as a monument to both human ingenuity and the shadows history casts. Hashima's skyline, so densely packed it once resembled a battleship, now serves as a reminder that even the most populated places can become utterly empty, their stories frozen behind barriers that few will ever cross. In the cold waters off Iceland's southern coast, something extraordinary happened in November 1963. Without warning, the ocean began to boil. Steam rose in thick plumes. The sea churned and hissed. And then, from beneath the waves, fire broke through. A volcanic eruption was underway, not on land, but deep underwater. For days, the eruption continued, spewing lava and ash into the sky. And when the smoke finally cleared, something new had emerged from the sea. An island. One that had never existed before. They named it Surtsey, after Surtur, the fire giant of Norse mythology. And from the moment it appeared, scientists knew this was a rare opportunity. A brand new landmass, born in front of human eyes. A chance to watch, in real time, how life colonizes a barren, lifeless island. How seeds arrive. How plants take root. How ecosystems form from nothing. But there was a problem. If humans were allowed to visit freely, they would contaminate the process. They would bring seeds on their shoes, bacteria on their clothes, animals in their wake. The experiment would be ruined before it even began. So the Icelandic government made a decision. Surtsey would be protected, completely. Access would be forbidden to everyone except a small group of approved scientists. No tourists, no casual visitors, no one who didn't have a specific documented reason to be there. And even those who were allowed to land had to follow strict protocols. Clean boots, sterilized equipment, no food brought ashore. The island would remain as untouched as possible, a natural laboratory where the Earth could show us, step by step, how life begins. The eruption that created Surtsey lasted for nearly 4 years, ending in 1967. By the time it stopped, the island covered about 1.3 square miles, rising roughly 500 feet above sea level. It was a raw, blackened landscape of volcanic rock and ash. No soil, no plants, no animals, just heat, stone, and silence. And then, slowly, life arrived. The first visitors were birds. Seabirds, blown off course or simply curious, began landing on the island. They rested on the rocks. They left droppings. And in those droppings were seeds carried from distant shores. Within a few years, the first plants began to appear. Mosses and lichens clinging to cracks in the rock. Then grasses, their roots breaking down the volcanic stone into soil. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Surtsey was transforming. Scientists documented every step. They cataloged every species that arrived, every plant that took root, every insect that appeared. It was a living record of ecological succession, the process by which lifeless land becomes a thriving ecosystem. And what they found was fascinating. Life didn't arrive randomly. It followed patterns. Certain species came first, pioneers that could survive in harsh conditions. They changed the environment, making it more hospitable. And then other species followed, building on what the pioneers had created. Today, more than 60 years after its birth, Surtsey is covered in vegetation. There are grasses, wildflowers, even small shrubs. Seabirds nest on its slopes. Seals haul out on its shores. Insects, carried by the wind, have established populations. The island is alive, but it's still forbidden. Access to Surtsey remains tightly controlled. Only a handful of scientists are allowed to visit each year, and their stays are brief. They conduct surveys, collect samples, take measurements. But they don't linger. They don't explore freely. They treat the island with the reverence of a sacred site, because in many ways, that's what it is. A place where nature is allowed to unfold without human interference. A place where we can watch, but not touch. The restrictions have been effective. Surtsey remains one of the most pristine natural environments on Earth. Unlike almost every other island, it has never been farmed, never been logged, never been developed. It exists in a state that's almost impossible to find anywhere else, wild, unaltered, and still becoming. But the island is changing in other ways too. Erosion is taking its toll. Wind and waves are slowly wearing away at Surtsey's shores, carving cliffs and carrying away rock. Scientists estimate that the island will lose much of its mass over the coming centuries, gradually shrinking back into the sea. In a way, Surtsey is temporary, a brief moment in geological time. And that makes it even more precious. There's something deeply compelling about Surtsey. It's not ancient, it's not mysterious in the traditional sense, but it represents something rare. A place where we've chosen to step back, to let nature lead, to resist the urge to claim, develop, or exploit. And in doing so, we've gained something far more valuable: knowledge. An understanding of how life works, how it spreads, how it adapts. The island has been designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized not for its beauty or its history, but for its scientific importance. It's a reminder that some places are worth more untouched than they ever could be with our presence. And as long as Surtsey exists, it will remain exactly that: a forbidden island, a living laboratory, and a quiet testament to the resilience of life itself. Bouvet Island. If Surtsey represents isolation by scientific decree, Bouvet Island embodies isolation in its purest form. Remoteness so extreme that few humans have ever stood on its shores. Located in the South Atlantic Ocean at coordinates 54 degrees, 26 minutes south, 3 degrees, 24 minutes east, Bouvet lies 1,600 kilometers from Antarctica and 20,600 kilometers from South Africa, making it the most remote island on Earth. The nearest land of any kind is Queen Maud Land in Antarctica, still about 1,600 kilometers away across storm-tossed seas. Covering 49 square kilometers, 93% of which is buried under glaciers, the island rises to its highest point at Olavtoppen, 780 meters above the Atlantic. Bouvet's discovery history reads like a tale of persistence and frustration. French explorer Jean-Baptiste Charles Bouvet de Lozier first sighted the island on January 1, 1739, but weather and ice prevented him from landing, and he recorded the position incorrectly. For decades, the island was considered lost, a phantom on outdated charts. British whaling ships rediscovered it in December 1808, and Captain James Lindsay confirmed its existence, though he too could not land. The first confirmed landing did not occur until December 1, 1927, when a Norwegian expedition aboard the ship Norvegia finally set foot on the island. Norway claimed Bouvet that same year, and the United Kingdom, which had staked a claim in 1825, did not contest Norwegian sovereignty. Since 1971, Bouvet has been designated a nature reserve, and no permanent population has ever existed there. The island is volcanic in origin, part of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, though the date of its last eruption remains unknown, likely sometime within the past 10,000 years. Steep cliffs rise on all sides, some reaching heights of 500 meters, and the only accessible landing point is Niroisa, a small area formed by a landslide in 1955. Sea ice surrounds the island for most of the year, and the weather is relentlessly hostile. Fog, freezing rain, and high winds are constant companions. Temperatures hover between -1 and +1 degrees Celsius year-round, and wind speeds regularly exceed 100 kilometers per hour. Precipitation falls frequently, though the total quantity is low, and the glacier covering 93% of the island can be up to 100 meters thick in places. There is no natural harbor, and ocean swells make boat landings extremely dangerous. Helicopter landings are possible only during rare moments of calm weather, and even then, success is uncertain. The landing success rate for expeditions attempting to reach Bouvet stands at approximately 10%. 9 out of 10 attempts are turned back by conditions. An automated weather station was installed in 1977, providing meteorological data until it failed in 1989. It was replaced in 1996, but scientific visits remain rare, occurring roughly every 5 to 10 years. The Norwegian Polar Institute manages access, and permits are required from the Norwegian government, though applications are typically denied due to the extreme conditions. No tourist visits are permitted, Only scientific expeditions have any chance of approval, and even those face formidable obstacles. The nearest port is Cape Town, South Africa, 20,600 kilometers away, a 6-day journey by ship, and sea conditions are often impassable due to storms and ice. The best landing season runs from December to February, the Southern Hemisphere's summer, yet even then, only about 10 days per year offer conditions calm enough to consider a landing. Satellite imagery provides the primary means of monitoring the island, as webcams or permanent cameras would be destroyed by the weather within weeks. The last significant expedition reached Bouvet in 2015 when a Norwegian research team successfully landed. But Bouvet holds one enduring mystery that has never been solved. In April 1964, the British naval survey ship HMS Protector approached the island, and an expedition led by Alan Crawford landed at Neroisa. There, they discovered an abandoned lifeboat in good condition, appearing to have been recently placed rather than washed ashore by storms. Nearby lay a copper flotation tank, oars, and a drum containing supplies. The lifeboat bore no identification markings, and there were no footprints, no people, no camp, nothing to explain its presence. Weather conditions showed no signs of recent storms that might have deposited debris from afar. The lifeboat was photographed and documented, but its origin was never determined despite investigations. No ships had been reported missing in the area, and no distress calls had been received. Theories emerged. Perhaps it was emergency equipment left during a rescue mission, or scientific expedition gear deliberately abandoned, or a rescue boat dropped and forgotten when the emergency was resolved. Subsequent expeditions found no additional evidence, and the mystery remains unsolved. One of Bouvet's most famous enigmas. Despite its inhospitability, Bouvet supports life. Antarctic fur seals and southern elephant seals haul out on the ice-free areas. And penguins, chinstrap and macaroni species, nest along the rocky shores. Seabirds, including petrels and albatrosses, circle the island, and the limited vegetation consists of mosses and lichens clinging to exposed rock. Research on Bouvet focuses on glaciology, oceanography, and wildlife populations, with the island serving as an important data point for South Atlantic weather modeling and studies of the Antarctic circumpolar current. There is no airstrip and no flatland suitable for aircraft. Helicopters remain the only option, requiring a ship-based launch within operational range, and the journey from Cape Town takes 6 days under favorable conditions. Bouvet Island remains one of the most inaccessible places on the planet, not by human decree, but by the sheer hostility of nature itself. Remote, storm-battered, and shrouded in ice, it stands as a monument to the limits of human reach, a place where even the most determined explorers find the door closed far more often than it opens, the most remote island on Earth, where even rescue is impossible. A place so isolated that only 1 in 10 expeditions succeeds in landing. Do you really want to be like the ones who ignore these extremes until they vanish from memory? Subscribe now before you forget, because forgetting is how entire worlds disappear. And if you're still holding back, type in the comments why you're willing to let knowledge slip away. In the heart of Moscow, rising behind thick walls of red brick and stone, sits one of the most recognizable landmarks in the world. The Kremlin. Its golden domes gleam in the sunlight. Its towers stand watch over Red Square. Millions of tourists pass by its walls every year, cameras raised, snapping photos of its grandeur. But very few of them will ever step inside the parts of the Kremlin that matter most, because behind those ancient walls, beyond the museums and public squares, lies a fortress that remains, to this day, one of the most restricted and secretive government complexes on Earth. The word Kremlin simply means fortress in Russian, and Moscow's Kremlin is exactly that, a fortified complex dating back to the 12th century, though most of the structures standing today were built in the late 1400s. It sits on Borovitsky Hill, overlooking the Moskva River, and covers 68 acres of carefully guarded ground. Within its walls are palaces, cathedrals, armories, and administrative buildings. Some are open to the public, others are not. And it's those others, the ones you can't see, that hold the real power. The Kremlin has always been the seat of Russian authority. For centuries, it was home to czars and emperors, the center of imperial rule. After the Russian Revolution in 1917, it became the headquarters of the Soviet government. And today, it remains the official residence of the President of Russia and the administrative heart of the Russian state. It's not just a symbol of power. It is power, concentrated and contained within walls that have stood for over 500 years. Access to the Kremlin is tightly controlled. Tourists can visit certain sections, the Armory Chamber, with its collection of imperial treasures, the Cathedral Square, with its stunning churches and golden domes. But the working heart of the Kremlin, the offices, the meeting rooms, the private quarters, those remain off-limits. You can't simply walk into the Senate Palace, where the president's office is located. You can't explore the administrative wings or peer into the chambers where decisions that shape global politics are made. The Kremlin allows you to see its surface, but never what lies beneath. And beneath is a story in itself. Because the Kremlin isn't just what you see above ground. Over the centuries, tunnels have been built beneath the complex. Some were designed for defense, secret passages allowing leaders to escape during sieges or invasions. Others were constructed more recently, during the Cold War, as part of a vast underground network linking government buildings and providing secure routes for officials in case of nuclear attack. These tunnels are rumored to stretch for miles, connecting the Kremlin to metro stations, government bunkers, and other key locations across Moscow. But details are scarce. The Russian government has never confirmed the full extent of the network. Maps don't exist, at least not publicly, and those who have worked within the system rarely speak about what they've seen. The Kremlin's role in Russian history is inseparable from the nation's identity. It has witnessed coronations and revolutions. It has been besieged, burned, rebuilt, and transformed. Napoleon stood within its walls during his brief occupation of Moscow in 1812. Stalin ruled from here during World War II, directing the Soviet war effort from deep within the fortress. And today, it remains the nerve center of Russian governance, a place where history and power converge. But the Kremlin is more than just a government building. It's a symbol, a statement. Its walls, thick and imposing, send a message. What happens inside is not for you to know. And that secrecy, that carefully maintained distance between the public and the seat of power, is part of what makes the Kremlin so compelling. It's not hidden in the wilderness. It's not tucked away on a remote island. It's right there, in the center of Moscow, surrounded by millions of people. And yet, it remains fundamentally inaccessible. Security around the Kremlin is intense. Federal Protective Service officers, armed and alert, patrol the perimeter. Cameras monitor every angle. Entry points are heavily guarded, and even those with official business must pass through multiple layers of clearance. For the average person, getting inside the restricted areas is impossible. For those with power, influence, or official standing, it's difficult. The Kremlin doesn't open its doors easily, even to its own. There's also an eerie quality to the place, not supernatural, but historical. The weight of everything that has happened within those walls presses down on the present. Decisions made here have shaped the course of world events. Wars have been declared, treaties signed, lives altered by the stroke of a pen. And much of it happened behind closed doors, in rooms that no outsider will ever see. The Kremlin has also been the site of darker moments. During Stalin's purges, thousands were arrested, interrogated, and sentenced within its walls or in buildings connected to it. The machinery of state power, at its most brutal, operated from here, and while the Soviet Union has long since fallen, the Kremlin remains. Its role has evolved, but its essence has not. It is still the fortress. Still the center. Still the place where Russia's future is decided, often in silence, always out of sight. For visitors who do make it into the public sections, the experience is surreal. You walk through halls lined with gold and marble. You stand beneath frescoes painted centuries ago. You see the grandeur, the history, the artistry. But you also feel the distance, the sense that you're only seeing what they want you to see. That the real Kremlin, the one where decisions are made and power is wielded, exists somewhere else, somewhere you'll never reach. The Kremlin is forbidden not by law, but by design. It's a fortress in the truest sense, built to keep people out as much as to keep power in. And in a world where so many places can be accessed with the right permit, the right guide, or the right amount of money, the Kremlin stands as a reminder that some doors remain firmly closed, that some places, no matter how visible, remain beyond reach. As we leave Moscow behind, the Kremlin's towers fade into the skyline. But the questions linger. What happens inside those walls? What decisions are being made? What secrets are held in rooms we'll never see? The Kremlin doesn't answer. It never has. It simply stands, as it has for centuries, silent, powerful, and impenetrable. Deep in the southern Ural Mountains of Russia, far from the nearest city, far from the reach of most roads, rises a mountain that few have heard of, and fewer still have climbed. Mount Yamantau. At 1,740 meters, it's the highest peak in the southern Urals. But it's not the height that makes it mysterious. It's what lies beneath. For decades, rumors have swirled around Mount Yamantau. Whispers of underground facilities, vast bunkers carved deep into the rock, secret military installations hidden beneath the mountain's forested slopes. The Russian government has never fully confirmed what's there, but satellite imagery, leaked reports, and the testimonies of those who've worked in the region all point to the same conclusion. Something is happening beneath Mount Yamantau. Something big. And something the Russian government doesn't want the world to see. The story begins during the Cold War. In the 1970s and 1980s, as tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union reached their peak, both superpowers were preparing for the unthinkable: nuclear war. Across the USSR, massive underground complexes were built, designed to protect leadership and military command structures in the event of a nuclear strike. Some of these bunkers were well documented, others were not. Mount Yamantau falls into the latter category. Western intelligence agencies first became aware of unusual activity around the mountain in the late 1970s. Construction was underway. Large amounts of earth were being moved. Rail lines were extended into the area. And workers, many of them brought in from distant parts of the Soviet Union, were arriving in numbers that didn't match any civilian purpose. The scale of the operation was enormous, far larger than a simple mining project or hydroelectric facility. And as the years went by, the construction continued. Decade after decade, through the collapse of the Soviet Union and into the modern era, work at Mount Yamantau never stopped. So what's down there? The truth is, no one outside of the Russian military and government knows for certain. But theories abound. The most widely accepted is that Mount Yamantau houses one of Russia's most important continuity of government facilities. A massive underground bunker designed to shelter Russia's leadership in the event of nuclear war. A place where the government could continue to function even if the surface world was destroyed. Some reports suggest the complex includes living quarters, command centers, communication hubs, and storage facilities large enough to sustain thousands of people for months, possibly years. Others claim the facility is tied to Russia's nuclear arsenal, either as a command center for strategic forces or as a storage site for nuclear materials. Still others speculate that it's connected to Russia's Dead Hand system, an automated nuclear response mechanism designed to launch a retaliatory strike even if the country's leadership is wiped out. The Russian government has offered explanations over the years, but they've been vague and often contradictory. At various times, officials have claimed the site is a mining operation, a storage facility for Russian treasures, or a bunker for civilians in case of nuclear attack. But none of these explanations fully account for the scale of the construction or the level of secrecy surrounding it. And the fact that access to the area is tightly restricted, even for Russian citizens, only deepens the mystery. The region around Mount Yamantau is designated as a closed zone. You can't just drive there. The roads leading to the mountain are blocked. Military checkpoints control access, and even flying over the area is prohibited. Satellite imagery shows the mountain's surface, dense forest, a few roads, some structures that could be ventilation shafts or access points. But most of what's happening is underground, hidden beneath hundreds of feet of rock. Workers who've been inside the complex, and there are a few who've spoken anonymously over the years, describe something vast. Tunnels that stretch for miles. Chambers large enough to house entire city blocks. Rail lines running deep underground. One former worker, speaking to a Western journalist in the 1990s, claimed the facility was like an underground city, with multiple levels, its own power supply, and enough space to accommodate tens of thousands of people. Whether that account is accurate is impossible to verify. But it aligns with what intelligence agencies have pieced together from satellite data and other sources. What makes Mount Yamantau particularly unsettling is its continued operation. This isn't a Cold War relic that was abandoned when the Soviet Union fell. Construction has continued into the 21st century. In the 1990s, even as Russia's economy collapsed and funding for many military projects dried up, work at Yamantau carried on. That suggests the facility remains strategically important, that whatever it's designed to do, it's still relevant, still necessary. The mountain itself is remote, surrounded by dense forest and rugged terrain. The nearest town, Mezhgorye, is a closed settlement, meaning only those with official permission can enter. It's believed that many of the people living in Mezhgorye work at the Yamantau facility, though they're forbidden from speaking about what they do. The town is isolated, quiet, and tightly controlled. A place where questions aren't welcome. For those interested in Cold War history, secret military installations, or the hidden infrastructure of global superpowers, Mount Yamantau is endlessly fascinating. It's one of the last great mysteries of the nuclear age. A place that represents the lengths to which nations will go to ensure their survival. And a reminder that even in an era of satellite imagery and global transparency, some secrets remain stubbornly hidden. There's also something deeply unsettling about the idea of Mount Yamantau. The notion that somewhere beneath a quiet mountain in the Urals lies a facility designed to outlast the end of the world. A place built not for hope, but for survival after catastrophe. It's a monument to fear, to the belief that nuclear war was not just possible, but likely. And even though the Cold War ended decades ago, the facility remains. Still secret, still operational, still waiting. The Russian government has shown no signs of opening Mount Yamantau to inspection or allowing independent verification of what's inside. And given the current geopolitical climate, that's unlikely to change anytime soon. So the mystery endures. The mountain stands, its secrets buried deep beneath the rock. And those who know the truth aren't talking. As we move on, Mount Yamantau fades into the distance, just another peak in the Urals. But beneath its surface, something hums. Something waits. And perhaps that's exactly how it's meant to be. A mountain hiding an underground city built to survive nuclear war, still operational, still secret. And yet, most will scroll past, leaving it behind like it's nothing. Don't be one of them. Subscribe now. Javari Valley. From military secrecy and geological extremes, the journey moves into the Amazon, where isolation is not imposed by governments to hide secrets, but to protect those who have chosen to remain apart. The Javari Valley stretches across 85,000 square kilometers of western Amazon rainforest, an area the size of Austria, primarily within Brazil's Amazonas state and extending into Peru's Ucayali and Loreto regions. Officially established as the Javari Valley Indigenous Territory in 2001, this vast expanse is home to the largest concentration of uncontacted indigenous peoples on the planet. An estimated 16 uncontacted groups live within the forest, their exact number unknown, alongside 7 contacted tribes, including the Matsés, Matis, Marubo, and Kanamari. The contacted indigenous population numbers approximately 6,000, while the uncontacted population is roughly estimated at 2,000 to 3,000, a figure impossible to verify with precision. Brazilian law prohibits unauthorized entry into the Javari Valley under the management of FUNAI, the National Indigenous Foundation. Entry is illegal without authorization, and while enforcement is limited by the territory's immense size, penalties are severe for those caught violating the restrictions. The term uncontacted is preferred over isolated because these groups have actively chosen isolation, often rooted in historical violence from outsiders. Evidence of their existence comes from aerial photography, showing villages and cleared gardens, satellite imagery revealing thatched roof dwellings and footpaths, and occasional encounters with contacted tribes. Physical artifacts have been found, but the languages spoken by these groups remain unknown, possibly 16 distinct tongues. The uncontacted peoples live as hunter-gatherers with some agriculture, growing manioc, plantains, and corn, hunting with bows and blowguns, and fishing in the rivers that thread through the jungle. Housing consists of communal longhouses called malokas, though some groups are nomadic. Groups have been identified by researchers based on observation and are sometimes referred to by location: the Flecheros, or Arrow people, near the Itui River, isolated groups along the Kishido River, and multiple unnamed groups scattered throughout the territory. The reason for their isolation is not mystery, but survival. These populations have no immunity to common diseases. Influenza, measles, and COVID-19 could devastate entire communities within weeks. Previous contact attempts throughout history caused epidemics, and the memory of violence during the rubber boom of the late 1800s and early 1900s, when atrocities were committed against indigenous peoples, remains embedded in their cultural and spiritual reasons for staying apart. Logging and mining conflicts in more recent decades have only reinforced their decision to avoid contact. Brazilian law enshrines indigenous land rights in Article 231 of the Constitution, and since 1987, FUNAI has maintained a no-contact policy, reversing previous integration efforts. Sidney Posuelo, a FUNAI official, established this policy after witnessing the catastrophic effects of contact. Entry to the Javari Valley requires FUNAI authorization, granted only to researchers with specific approved projects, indigenous representatives, and government officials on specific missions. Violations carry criminal penalties, including fines up to approximately $200,000, prison sentences, and equipment confiscation. Physical barriers do not exist. The territory is too large, and such measures would be impractical. Monitoring consists of FUNAI posts on the territory's borders, occasional aerial surveillance, and indigenous monitoring by contacted tribes who serve as the first line of defense. But enforcement faces enormous challenges. The territory is vast, government resources are limited, and illegal incursions occur regularly from loggers seeking mahogany and cedar, miners prospecting for gold, drug traffickers using routes through the territory, and commercial fishermen poaching in the rivers. The dangers of protecting the Javari Valley became tragically clear on June 5, 2022, when British journalist Dom Phillips and FUNAI expert Bruno Pereira were murdered while investigating illegal fishing. Their bodies were found on June 15th, and fishermen were arrested and convicted, but the incident highlighted the violence faced by those working to protect uncontacted groups. Previous attacks on FUNAI staff have occurred multiple times, with indigenous monitors threatened and equipment destroyed. Resource conflicts drive much of the violence. Timber from old-growth hardwoods commands extremely high prices. Gold deposits attract illegal miners, and fish stocks hold significant commercial value. Government protection has been insufficient, with FUNAI's budget cut severely between 2019 and 2022, leading to staff reductions and closed posts. International pressure from NGOs and the United Nations has criticized Brazil for inadequate protection, and under the current administration as of 2024, there has been renewed commitment to safeguarding the territory, with FUNAI increasing patrols and indigenous-led monitoring expanding. Technology, including drones and satellites, has improved monitoring capabilities. What is known about the uncontacted groups comes from careful documentation methods. Aerial photography from Funai-authorized flights captured footage in 2008, 2011, and 2016, showing individuals with bows, bodies painted, and circular clearings with thatched roofs. Garden observations from the air reveal crop types. Bananas, manioc, and papaya have been identified in cleared forest patches. Movement patterns show that some groups are nomadic, building temporary shelters, while others are sedentary with permanent villages. Contact incidents are rare but do occur. Occasionally, arrows are shot at aircraft, and rare encounters with contacted tribes sometimes turn hostile. In 2014, a group emerged from the forest on the Peru side, reporting attacks by outsiders, a reminder of the threats these populations face. Cultural artifacts from rare findings include woven baskets, pottery shards, and arrow types distinct from contacted tribes' styles, offering glimpses into the diversity of cultures hidden within the forest. The territory remains officially protected, but pressure continues as deforestation encroaches on the edges and political challenges shift Brazilian government policies. The long-term survival of the uncontacted peoples of the Javari Valley depends entirely on continued protection and enforcement, a commitment that must be maintained across generations. The forest holds them, the law shields them, and the world, if it truly respects their choice, must leave them in peace. Paris Catacombs. From the Amazon's green labyrinth, the journey descends beneath one of the world's most visited cities, into tunnels where darkness holds secrets far older than the streets above. Beneath Paris, primarily under the 14th arrondissement, lies a network of tunnels stretching 290 kilometers, 180 miles, carved from limestone quarries that date back to the 12th century. Only 1.5 kilometers, roughly 1 mile, is open to tourists as the official ossuary containing the remains of 6 million people. The remaining 288 kilometers, 179 miles, are illegal to enter, yet they remain one of the city's most enduring mysteries. The quarries were excavated between the 12th and 18th centuries to extract limestone for constructing Paris itself. Notre Dame, the Louvre, and countless other buildings rose from stone pulled from beneath the city. But by the 1770s, problems emerged as buildings began collapsing into voids below. In 1774, a section of Rue d'Enfer collapsed, swallowing part of the street into a sinkhole, prompting the establishment of the Inspection des Carrières in 1777, an agency that still exists today as the Inspection Générale des Carrières, or IGC. Paris faced another crisis by the 1780s. Its cemeteries were dangerously overcrowded. Les Innocents Cemetery, used since medieval times, had become so full that in 1780, a cemetery wall collapsed, spilling corpses into an adjacent property. The decision was made to close the cemeteries and move remains underground. Beginning in 1785, nightly processions carried bones through the streets in carts covered with black cloth, blessed by ceremonies, and transferred into the quarries. The process continued until 1814, with 17 cemeteries emptied and their contents arranged decoratively in the tunnels. Skulls and femurs were stacked in walls, patterns and designs created, and plaques with inscriptions installed in 1809. Public visits began by appointment, and the catacombs became a tourist attraction throughout the 19th century. The public ossuary today offers a small, curated section accessible via a spiral staircase descending 131 steps, where the temperature remains a constant 14 degrees Celsius year-round. The route takes approximately 45 minutes to walk and features sites such as the Pour-Mahon sculpture and the crypt of the sepulchral lamp. At the entrance, an inscription warns, "Arrête, c'est ici l'empire de la mort." Stop. This is the empire of death. Visitors exit via 83 stairs back to the surface, and tickets cost $14 for adults as of 2024, with the site closed on Mondays and some holidays. But the restricted sections are vast. Former quarries never converted to ossuaries. Unmapped areas that even the IGC does not fully understand. tunnels that are flooded or structurally unstable. Utilities run through the catacombs. Water mains, electrical cables, and metro tunnels intersect the network in places. Secret entrances number in the hundreds. Manholes, basement connections from old buildings, sewer access points. Many have been sealed, but some remain open, known to the cataphiles. Urban explorers who enter illegally and have formed a subculture dating to the 1970s, possibly earlier. Cataphiles enter through unlocked manhole covers, basement passages, sewer connections, and metro maintenance tunnels. Once inside, they hold parties and concerts, create art installations and murals, explore and map unknown sections, and gather socially in chambers they have named. These locations include the beach, a sand-filled chamber, the cathedral, a large vaulted space, the cinema, discovered by police in 2004, the castle, an elaborately carved section, and the bunker, a World War II-era shelter. Hundreds more locations have unofficial names known only to those who navigate the darkness. The 2004 discovery of the cinema became legendary. Police found a fully equipped underground cinema with a screen, projector, seating, a bar, and a restaurant. Electricity had been tapped from the city grid, and a phone line had been installed. When officers returned later to investigate further, everything had been removed, and a note was left. Do not try to find us. In 2017, 2 teenagers entered on a Wednesday night and became lost, wandering in darkness for 3 days before being found on Saturday, suffering from severe dehydration and hypothermia. They were rescued by the Cataflics, the special police unit of IGC inspection officers tasked with patrolling the tunnels. The risks of illegal entry are real. Getting lost is easy in the darkness, with no light and no landmarks to guide the way. Structural collapse is a constant threat. Flooding submerges some areas entirely, and toxic air pockets can form in poorly ventilated sections. There is no cell service underground, making rescue impossible without knowing exactly where someone is trapped. Illegal entry is punishable by fines up to €60, and the Cataflics patrol regularly, knowing major access points and holding the power to fine on the spot. Dozens of arrests occur annually, though exact numbers are not released and equipment and cameras are confiscated. Enforcement is difficult because there are too many access points to seal them all, and the tunnels are too extensive to patrol thoroughly. It is a cat-and-mouse game. With steel doors installed at key points, some entrances welded shut, motion sensors placed in some areas, and regular patrols conducted. Signs in the public section warn against exploring further, and barriers mark the limits of legal access. After 2017, enhanced security was implemented due to terrorism concerns, with fears that attacks could be launched via the tunnels. The catacombs faced structural concerns in the 2020s. As tunnels continue deteriorating and sinkhole risk increases, several Paris street collapses have been attributed to underground voids, and the IGC conducts ongoing maintenance, injecting concrete to stabilize areas, installing support pillars, and mapping previously unknown sections. Municipal utility conflicts arise as new metro lines intersect the catacombs, water and sewer infrastructure runs through tunnels, and fiber optic cables are installed. Debate continues about preservation versus access. Some argue for expanded public tours, while others want stricter enforcement. During COVID-19, the public section closed from March 2020 to May 2021, and reports indicated increased illegal activity during the closure. In 2023, new security measures were implemented, including additional cameras and reinforced barriers. Beneath Paris, in 179 miles of darkness, the forbidden sections of the catacombs remain a world unto themselves, mapped by those who dare, patrolled by those who enforce, and unknown in full even to the city that built them. Snake Island. From human-made tunnels, the final destination returns to nature's dominion, to an island where evolution itself has created a barrier no law could match. Off the coast of São Paulo State, Brazil, 33 kilometers from the mainland, lies Ilha da Queimada Grande, Snake Island, a 43-hectare expanse where the concentration of venomous serpents is unmatched anywhere on Earth. The island rises to an elevation of 206 meters. Its rocky terrain heavily forested with Atlantic rainforest vegetation, surrounded by cliffs with no beaches to offer safe landing. The climate is subtropical and humid, and the island has been permanently closed to the public since the 1920s, controlled by the Brazilian Navy. No humans live there, but thousands of snakes do. The species responsible for Snake Island's deadly reputation is the golden lancehead viper, known scientifically as Bothrops insularis. This snake is endemic to the island, found nowhere else on Earth, and evolved in isolation after sea levels rose approximately 11,000 years ago, cutting the island off from the mainland. Without ground-dwelling prey, the golden lancehead adapted to hunt birds, developing venom 5 times more potent than its mainland relatives. The venom contains hemotoxins that destroy tissue, cause internal bleeding, and lead to kidney failure, with a mortality rate of 7% even with treatment. Without treatment, death can occur within hours. Population estimates for the golden lancehead vary, but research suggests between 2,000 and 4,000 snakes inhabit the island, a density of 1 to 5 snakes per square meter in some areas. The snakes occupy every ecological niche: the forest floor, the branches of trees, and rocky crevices. They are pit vipers, detecting heat signatures from prey with specialized organs, and they are ambush predators, striking with speed and precision. Their golden coloring, ranging from pale yellow to light brown, provides camouflage among the forest's dappled light. The island's history includes human presence, but only briefly. A lighthouse was constructed in 1909 to guide ships navigating the treacherous coast, and a lighthouse keeper and his family lived on the island to maintain it. Local legend claims that snakes invaded the lighthouse one night, forcing the keeper and his family to flee, but they were bitten and died before reaching their boat. While the story is likely exaggerated, it reflects the very real dangers the island poses. The lighthouse was automated in the 1920s, ending permanent human habitation, and the Brazilian Navy took control, prohibiting public access. The golden lancehead's venom potency evolved because birds are more resistant to toxins than mammals, requiring the snakes to develop more lethal compounds to ensure kills. Migratory birds stop on the island during seasonal journeys, providing the primary food source for the vipers. The snakes climb trees and wait in branches, striking birds as they land or roost. This arboreal hunting behavior is rare among lancehead species, which typically hunt on the ground. Brazilian environmental law classifies the golden lancehead as critically endangered, with the island designated a protected area under the control of the Chico Mendes Institute for Biodiversity Conservation. Access is prohibited except for scientific research, and permits are granted rarely, only to herpetologists and ecologists with approved projects. Military personnel from the Navy conduct annual maintenance on the automated lighthouse, but visits are brief and heavily planned, with personnel moving only along cleared paths and wearing protective gear. Tourist boats occasionally pass near the island, allowing views from a safe distance, but landing is strictly illegal, with violators facing fines up to approximately $10,000 and potential criminal charges. Illegal landings have occurred, driven by black market demand for golden lancehead vipers, which can sell for $10,000 to $30,000 per snake to collectors. Poaching threatens the already endangered population, and the Chico Mendes Institute for Biodiversity Conservation works with the Navy to patrol the waters around the island, though enforcement is difficult given the remoteness and limited resources. The island's ecosystem is fragile and unique. Beyond the golden lancehead, vegetation includes Atlantic rainforest species, though plant diversity is lower than on the mainland due to isolation. Seabirds nest on the cliffs, and marine life thrives in the waters surrounding the island, with fish populations and coral formations providing rich biodiversity. No mammals live on the island, which contributed to the evolutionary pressures that shaped the golden lancehead's specialization. Research conducted on Snake Island focuses on the venom's properties, which hold potential medical applications, including anticoagulants that could treat heart disease and stroke. Genetic studies examine how isolation and lack of genetic diversity affect populations, and ecological research looks at predator-prey dynamics in a closed system. Scientists visiting the island must take extreme precautions, wearing boots, long pants, and moving slowly to avoid surprising snakes. Every expedition is planned with emergency evacuation procedures, and anti-venom supplies are kept on standby, though the specific anti-venom for golden lancehead bites is difficult to produce and limited in availability. Climate change poses a threat to the island's ecosystem, as rising sea levels could reduce the landmass, and shifting bird migration patterns might disrupt the food supply for the snakes. Conservation efforts focus on monitoring population numbers through capture-mark-recapture studies and protecting habitat from invasive species that could arrive via boats or debris. The Brazilian government has considered proposals for controlled ecotourism, but concerns about safety and ecological impact have kept such plans from advancing. Snake Island remains one of the few places on Earth where nature alone enforces the prohibition. No walls, no guards, no laws are needed beyond the initial designation. The golden lancehead vipers do the rest. It is a place where evolution has created a defense so perfect that humans, for all their technology and ambition, must simply stay away. The island sits visible from Brazil's coast, forested and green, but utterly untouchable. A reminder that some boundaries are drawn not by governments or history, but by life itself adapting to survive. 10 places, each forbidden for reasons as varied as the landscapes themselves. From the Arctic cold of Devon Island to the venomous shores of Snake Island, from the plague-scarred ruins of Poveglia to the living forests of the Javari Valley, these locations span continents and climates. Yet all share one truth: they remain beyond reach. Some are sealed by governments guarding secrets, bunkers carved into mountains, tunnels beneath fortresses, closed cities where questions are never answered. Others are protected by law to preserve what is fragile. Uncontacted peoples choosing isolation. Newborn islands where life is just beginning. Endangered species that cannot coexist with human presence. Still others are closed by nature itself. Remoteness so absolute that storms and ice turn back even the most determined, or dangers so extreme that survival cannot be guaranteed. These places exist on maps, visible in satellite images, discussed in documents and reports, yet they remain inaccessible in ways that matter. They remind us that the world, for all its roads and flights and constant motion, still holds spaces that cannot be entered, whether by choice, by law, by geography, or by the simple fact that some doors are meant to stay closed. What lies beyond those boundaries, whether secrets of state, fragile ecosystems, or civilizations that wish to remain unseen, stays locked away, known only to the few with permission or to no one at all. The boundaries humanity maintains reveal as much about our limits as our reach. In the end, the 10 forbidden places on Earth stand as monuments to what we cannot have, reminding us that exploration, for all its glory, must sometimes stop at the threshold and look no further. These forbidden places are not just about what we can't reach. They're warnings about how easily the world's secrets disappear when no one pays attention. If you walk away without subscribing, you're choosing to forget what others fought to protect, burying knowledge, never to return. Don't make that mistake. Subscribe now. Thanks for watching, and as always, until next time, stay safe.